Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to yet another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. We are still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We are about to cross the 900 subscriber threshold, so can't believe we've made it to that point already. And thank you to everybody that's hit that big red button below already. But if a few more of you could do that, that would be incredible. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss future episodes and future Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, so now that we got that all the way out of the way, you might notice that this first segment is pretty simply but aptly titled, that it's just Giannis, because that's all that needs to be said. Giannis Antetokounmpo is dominating EuroBasket right now, and his latest outing, which was the round of 16 game against Israel, he put up a 37 spot, and he's been averaging a 30 spot through the entirety of EuroBasket so far, through his 4 appearances, through the first 3 group phase games, and then, of course, this latest round of 16 outing versus Israel. Giannis is averaging 30 points, 9.8 rebounds, 4 assists on, wait for it, 72.5% shooting from the field. We are seeing just another zone that Giannis is entering right now. And you can predict that that kind of thing is going to come out when the guy's wearing grease across his chest. You know that he's going to have a little bit of extra added motivation to get his guys going in this kind of tournament. But what I think is really impressive is that this comes against one of the young guys in EuroBasket and in the NBA who has had a pretty great EuroBasket run, and along with the Utah Jazz's Lauri Markkanen, Denny Avdia is going to come into the 25-26 season with a lot of momentum, and and he's just going to be very, very high entering the next NBA season because he's had a heck of a run in EuroBasket, but unfortunately it came to an end because of Giannis. And we are seeing some otherworldly performances from that guy because we thought that maybe it was the most impressive thing that he was averaging 30 points a game in the NBA while shooting 60% from the field. Something that I believe nobody had ever done before. But now he's doing the same thing, shooting 72.5% from the field. I know it's just a 4 game sample size against Euro League competition, which, that's not even a negative thing that you could say anymore because the NBA, like all the basketball teams in the world, are so collectively talented that you can't even knock anybody from other countries for being worse at basketball because the entire world has caught up to the United States, at least, and everybody's just balling out. So I can't believe Giannis is still able to do this, though, to dominate at this level. But that's what you get when you put a top 3 consensus MVP vote getter, vote finisher for the past 3 years running in a EuroBasket tournament like that for while playing for his his home country. Anyways, we're gonna move forward. Taurean Prince, I feel like he's gotten a lot of up and down responses from Bucks fans and just the media alike over the course of this offseason, which I've been kind of confused with. I was under the impression that he had a very successful past season for the Bucks. Maybe you could ask a little bit more of him on the defensive end, and he doesn't really have that kind of mobility that you would like out of a wing, prospective wing defender in today's NBA. But I still believe that Taurean Prince was able to play his role extremely well, and he did what he was supposed to, and was one of the best pure 3 point shooters in the entire NBA last year. So I'm not really understanding all the extra criticism that gets thrown his way, but that's another thing for another day. But today, Dalton Sell of Fansided came out with an article that kind of rehashed a previous interview that John Horst, general manager of the Bucks, gave to the Athletic, where he was talking about his expectations going into the next year and, of course, all their offseason dealings. But he stopped for a second on Taurean Prince, and he gave a little bit of a specific nod to him and how the game plan affects him and how he affects the game plan. And he said, and I quote, "I think continuity is going to be good for TP, and I think our roster is better suited for Torian this year than it was last year." And I feel like the way that you can think that is just from adding all the extra shooting, or bringing back all the extra shooting, I should say, with Gary Trent, with Kevin Porter Jr., bringing in a guy like Myles Turner to space the floor even more. Of course, AJ Green's still there, bringing back Ryan Rollins, who shot over 40% from three. So all the Bucks' core 3 point shooters are still on the team and ready to go out and space the floor even more than it could have possibly been last year. So that's something to really be excited about, and it's something to be excited about specifically for Taurean Prince because, of course, this is his wheelhouse. He gets paid to hit threes and be a serviceable defender on the other end. And again, maybe Some were a little bit disappointed by his effort on that end, but I feel like as he ages, he's still doing a fairly adequate job of keeping up with younger wings in the NBA and switching onto guards on the perimeter. Sure, he could be better, but I don't think Bucks fans are in a position to really uh, be grasping at Taurean Prince being a better defender again as he continues to age. Okay, we are going to move to something that I feel like isn't necessarily a possibility. Surely, in the grand scheme of things, everything's a possibility. Obviously, a guy like Bobby Portis could be traded at any point. But there's been a growing opinion, I guess, with NBA writers that Bobby Portis could be on the not on the trade block, but a potential trade candidate or someone that the Bucks look to get future assets out of going forward, or at least up to the trade deadline. And I think that's very interesting because Bobby has proved to be one of, if not the best bench scoring option, at least due to his efficiency in the entire NBA. And that's been a years long running thing. And especially bringing him back on the extension in the aftermath of that, that doesn't really make much sense unless you tried to bring him back on extra salary and you could try and get him to another team that you view as more of a contender. Like I know the Warriors were a big rumor. Um, but it doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon. But anyways, Athlon Sports Nathaniel Holloway is one of these writers that included Bobby Portis in a little list of Bucks players that could eventually be trade candidates, and he included three in his list. And I figured that Bobby Portis was the only one worth covering because the first two were Giannis, who that's already been that's beating a dead horse at this point, and Kyle Kuzma, who we've already touched on a lot in previous episodes. But Bobby Portis, it's kind of interesting seeing his name on that article. He was the third choice, and as I scrolled down to see it, my eyes kind of popped. But Nathaniel Holloway says, while the Bucks re-sign Portis this offseason, the addition of Turner will likely have him coming off the bench once again, which I don't really like. That's not news necessarily. We knew and we've known from the previous years that Bobby Portis is greatly suited for the bench. It's not like this is a new experiment where we have Bobby Portis coming off the bench to try and bring added offense to the reserves. The addition of Turner will likely have him coming off the bench once again. Of course, the 30-year-old big man was expected to be Milwaukee's new starting center this season after Brook Lopez left in free agency, but that has now changed with the addition of Turner. I feel like that wasn't where my mind went, at least when Brook Lopez left and there was this big glaring hole at the center position. My first thought wasn't, oh yeah, Bobby Portis is going to fill in as our new five man. My first thought was, he might not love it very much, but Giannis is probably going to have to play full time center. And that's just the reality of it. You need his defense around the basket in that case. And, you can't really rely on Jericho Sims to step up quite yet and handle that kind of responsibility. So it's going to fall on Giannis as things tend to do. But it never really occurred to me that, oh yeah, Bobby Portis is the new starting center. I feel like it's not ridiculous to say. Of course, he can in spot minutes, but it's not really something I would expect, or it's not a decision I would expect Doc Rivers and the coaching staff to make at any point this year. And that was even before Myles Turner was brought in. I don't love the idea of Bobby Portis playing center, at least on a full time or somewhat full time basis. That just doesn't really uh, connect with me. But anyways, to close this out, The Athletic put out a fan survey, and it got a pretty good response. It was almost 700 respondents or participants in the survey, so it's not necessarily a super small sample size of Bucks fans. So it was about 690 people responding on all these different things. So the Bucks, there's a lot of different opinions, a lot of dissension with Bucks fans, and it's seen very clearly in this survey. Basically, the first question that I chose to highlight in this whole thing, this was a whole article that came from the Athletic. Um, how confident are you in Bucks general manager John Horst? And I was not necessarily surprised by the results, but they do it as extremely confident, somewhat confident, not that confident, not at all confident. And through the extremely and somewhat confident portions, he got about 82% of the vote, and with most of it coming from the somewhat confident part at 55.7%, and extremely confident got 27.4%. So I thought that number was going to be smaller, the extremely confident, but not because I'm not confident in John Horst. I just felt like the grander view of John Horst from Bucks fans' perspective is that he wasn't doing anything this offseason. But, he was faced with some incredibly difficult decisions, and he managed to bring in a guy like Myles Turner, who next to Giannis, they have potential to wreck the league defensively together. Of course, losing Damian Lillard, you would never like to do that. But this was the position that he was faced. This was the reality that was given to him, that Dame wouldn't be available for the entire season, most likely. So he made the move that he thought would work best for the immediate future of the Bucks, and we'll see if it pans out. We'll see if it doesn't, but that's what he decided to do, and I'm kind of behind it because even though he took very drastic measures to make something happen, he made something happen, and that at least is something to look forward to. Next one was, how confident are you in Bucks head coach Doc Rivers? And again, on the scale of extremely confident, somewhat confident, not that confident, not at all confident, he scored drastically lower. From the not that confident to not at all confident, it was about 62% of the vote, and 32% coming from the somewhat confident, 4.7% coming from extremely confident. So I haven't necessarily been the type of guy that's like, oh, we got to throw all the blame on Doc Rivers because he hasn't necessarily been equipped with all of the best talent. It's not like Doc alone could have taken the 2025 Milwaukee Bucks and shot them up the totem pole to being championship contenders. But that's neither here nor there. I I would probably, if I had to answer this question from this survey, I'd probably go somewhere in the somewhat confident, that got 32.6% of the vote. Because I still do, like I do the rest of the team, or at least a lot of players on this team, I have faith. And that's something that I feel like Bucks fans have been lacking ever since the 2021 run. But, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Doc can figure out certain lineup configurations that just work, because we have a lot of guys that are very versatile, that can wear a lot of hats, and at the end of the day, that can shoot. And more or less, that's all you need in today's NBA. It's just guys that that can knock down a 3-point shot while also providing somewhat serviceable or at least competitive defense on the other end. And for that reason, for the kind of roster that Doc is being saddled with, I'm more I'm somewhat confident that Doc Rivers can at least lead the Bucks to maybe anywhere between a 4 and 6 seed. I really do believe the Bucks are going to land a guaranteed playoff spot. Maybe I'm crazy because there's a lot of Eastern Conference teams like the Hawks, like the Orlando Magic, that re-upped, like the Detroit Pistons, that are going to be coming back and competing for a guaranteed spot in the postseason. But I have faith in Doc Rivers. I have faith in this team, and I'm somewhat confident in Doc. But the last question, one that did kind of surprise me more than the others, was, among all NBA players, where does Giannis Antetokounmpo rank? The categories were best in the world, top 3 player in the world, top 5 player, and top 10 player. And then the last one, which got 0.1% of the vote somehow, was outside the top 10 players in the world. So I think that was a bot that got in there at the end that played as a Bucks fan to just answer that question negatively. But regardless, best player in the world got 25% of the vote. That's not the part I'm surprised about. Top 3 player got 61%, and top 5 player got just about 12% of the vote. I really don't I didn't at least have the idea that there were a lot of Bucks fans out there that would rank Giannis lower than a top 3 player in the world, especially as I've talked about ad nauseum the past 3 seasons that Giannis has played, placing top 3 in MVP voting year in and year out, and making 7 consecutive all NBA first teams. There's not really many places for him to be ranked below 3. So that's just me. If anything, he is number 3, and I'm comfortable with saying that. But we all know that there's a reason why he's placing top 3 in MVP voting year in and year out, and it's because he's a consensus top 3 player in the world every single year. And hopefully he can do some good things for Milwaukee next season. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest, presented by Fan Arch. Once again, I have been Dean Simon, and please leave a like, leave a comment down below, tell me what you thought about today's episode, and subscribe. Still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers, but we are inching our way there, getting very close. All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.